My kid and I were laughing about this photo because that photo was taken when she was 1 year old and she's now 16. So I should get a new headshot taken. Good evening to all of you. It is such a pleasure to be here at SF Demo Day. Betsy and I have been talking, I think for years now, about the urgent importance of developing professionals who are bilingual in both technology and public policy. Professionals who can help us as a society understand what tech can and can't do to advance public policy goals. So Betsy, I'm so honored to be here, to see your vision realized in the ambitious project of the Tech Policy Hub, and I'm humbled by the incredible talent of the first cohort of the Hub's fellows. The projects that are showcased here tonight are inspiring, as is the commitment demonstrated by each of your careers in putting technology into the service of people. So Betsy asked me to speak for about 15 minutes, and then maybe we'll have a little time for questions. As usually happens when I walk into a room like this, a room filled with smart technologists, I suffer from a little bit of imposter syndrome. My name is Nicole, and I'm a liberal arts major. In fact, I'm an American Studies major and English minor, and my fellowship was in poetry. My graduate degrees are not from the computer science or electrical engineering departments at Cal. They're from the School of Journalism and Law. But I also have over 20 years of experience working in the tech sector, and I proudly served as President Obama's Deputy Chief Technology Officer with responsibility for privacy, internet, and innovation policy. So maybe I stand as a proof point that tech is in fact a big tent, and even with all of those liberal arts cards stacked against me, I found a job and a place in the tech world. Relevant for this crowd, I'm hopefully the archetype of your future colleague, a policy wonk who shares your vision about how technology can help make people's lives better. The one who asks you to stay late to explain the output of that algorithm, where exactly the data is stored and when delete really means delete, and really, one more time, how differential privacy works. I'm the one who wants to be your partner in this complicated dance between technology and policy to do the job of serving the public interest. I believe tech can change how we behave as humans, and that humans influence how we build tech, and policy expresses the vision of how that relationship should work. The Hub, this fellowship, gets us a step closer to that future where the dance is real, where technology is not just bolted on at the end of a policy process, but is integral to the development, and it plays a continuing role as policy unfolds over time. It is the future of technology policymaking that takes seriously not only the question of what do we build, but who do we build for? But here's where we really are. There's not enough of you. People with tech skills who want to put their talent into public service. We have a pipeline problem. The need for modern technology in government is clear. Last year, our federal government spent $96 billion on IT. According to the federal agency CIOs, about 60% of those projects are at risk of being either over budget or behind schedule. The Social Security Administration, which pays $1 trillion in Social Security and disability benefits to 70 million Americans, relies on 60 million lines of COBOL, a computer language that was created in 1959. That's not merely inefficient, unable to take full advantage of open source databases and the scaling capabilities of cloud computing. There are actually a diminishing number of programmers in the workforce who know how to maintain this code. And that failure of our infrastructure and the modernization of our tech workforce puts the benefits of 70 million Americans at risk. This is not moonshot technology, but here's why it matters. The foundations of our democracy are built on the promise that government will deliver for the people. We are at the lowest point of public trust in government since the 1970s, and that's not about what's happening in DC this week. Those are statistics from a Pew Research study stretching from 1958 to 2015, before Donald Trump was elected. In 1964, 64% of Americans believed that government is run for the benefit of all people. In 2015, that number had dropped to 19%. 19. So let's pause this week's conversation about Russians and foreign interference and political polarization and consider that the erosion of trust in our government has been on a long slide. And one of the reasons is that we are not delivering for the people it's supposed to serve. That's why the non-glamorous work of modernizing a 70-year-old system matters just as much or more as perfecting a self-driving car or putting a person on Mars. We need DevOps and site reliability engineers and people who understand modern stack software development. We need people with the full suite of skills to build technology from human-centered design to product management. We need people with deep expertise in data governance, information security, and privacy. And those people need to understand how these skills advance our policy goals. Yes, to upgrade systems, but also to harness technology to serve all people, and particularly those most in need. If we can order a gluten-free chocolate cake on our mobile phone while sitting in our living room and have it delivered in an hour, then we should be able to help a single mother get food stamps without having to take a day off of work and fill out paperwork and stand in line at a limited hours government office. We should be able to get our benefits to our veterans who have fought for our country and the world that makes this tech possible in less than the 137 days, which was the average time it took their benefits to be processed up until the launch of a new system just earlier this year. We should be able to help immigrants renew their green cards in less than 6 months, a project that had been underway for 6 years at a cost of $1.2 billion with no results until we sent in a 6-person team in 2016 that rebuilt the entire process online in less than 18 months. Whether you leave here to work in city, state, or federal government, or a nonprofit, or in any capacity of public service, we can and must do better. Our failure to serve the people who most need the help, that is the source of the growing divide in our country and the challenge of our times. That is the most important technology problem before us. The good news is that the trend line in digital service delivery in the public sector looks strong, although it's hard to find real numbers. In the last decade, we've gone from 0 state-level chief data officers to 25 plus DC. So many that the Beek Center at Georgetown just this week launched a state CDO network. In a survey last year of small, medium, and large cities, 49% of the mayors reported that they had dedicated staff for managing data, and 34% had staff for innovation. There are 85 Code for America volunteer brigades around the country that collaborate with local governments and community organizations to build tech tools. And anecdotally, among those tens of thousands of volunteers, about 20 to 30% are actively seeking public sector tech jobs. Okay, so let's say we solve the pipeline problem with programs like the Hub and this fellowship. And now I'm going to speak to the rest of the room and not just the fellows. We must not squander their talent. We must stop consigning the technical talent in government to the back office. They are not here to solve our email problems. What do we need to do? So here's a few modest proposals. We need to take recruitment seriously, and not just tech folks, but diverse tech folks. That means actively going to find the best talent, and particularly among women and people of color, and convince them of their place in public service. The rest of the tech industry is beating down their doors with free food and massages at work, and we'll never be able to match that. But we can offer them the opportunity to make a difference at scale on the critical issues they care about. And we can create the type of flexibility that allows those folks to do tours of duty for 6 months or a year, which not only helps attract amazing talent, but actually encourages the refresh of tech knowledge in our government. We also need to send up a signal that government is safe for nerds. We need to create the environment that ensures they have modern tools to work with and the ability to do the type of experimentation, iterative design, and sometimes failure that is commonplace in tech, but still viewed warily by government. We need to actively create a space in which their talent is not only welcomed, but resourced. Third, we desperately need to change how we do procurement. Today, most public sector procurement processes are designed for waterfall development instead of agile, and it assumes that the government at the start of a project has full knowledge of what's needed and can specify in excruciating detail. It assumes that there will be no new ideas, knowledge, or conditions that will change during the project, and that is particularly difficult when it comes to software development. Finally, and most importantly, tech talent needs to be at the decision-making table, not just for clearly technical issues like revamping our Medicare databases or moving food stamp benefits online, although of course we need your help for that, but we also need you for decisions not only about the viability and safety of flying drones in commercial airspace, but about the privacy and civil liberties implications of doing so. We need you to help address natural disasters like fires or hurricanes by employing new communications, transportation, and sensor technologies. We are in the midst of a moment and a movement of tech-savvy people coming into public service. But to sustain this movement, we need to institutionalize our place at the table. We're seeing this happen in small corners of government, like the Boston Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics or the US Digital Services in 18F, which provide tech and other types of expertise for new approaches to building government services. Or we can see it in the nascent local governance bodies, like Oakland's Privacy Advisory Commission, which reviews surveillance technologies before they're adopted by the city. Or New York City's Automated Decision System Task Force, which was created to oversee the use of algorithmic decision-making in city agencies. These are good starts, but we need to see more. Because here's the thing. A movement can slip back into being just a moment if we fail to institutionalize its power. We as a society and certainly as policymakers, need to ensure your seat at the table, value your input, and engage you as the critical contributors that you are. Okay, so let's assume we assemble an army of you and we create a space for you at all levels of government. Let's even say we put resources behind you. Which problems are we going to solve? Now we get to the existential question, what do we build and who do we build for? And I'm conscious of the fact that this is the month and year in which Ridley Scott's techno-dystopic film Blade Runner takes place, so I may sound like I'm channeling Roy Batty. From a tech perspective, I have never seen the industry more in crisis in the 20+ years of doing this work. They are embattled by governments here and abroad, trolled by malicious and malign actors, and deeply uncertain about their own role in this world. And from time to time, I revisit John Perry Barlow's adamant Declaration of the Independence of Cyberspace from 1996, in which he wrote to all the governments of the world, quote, "I declare the global social space we are building to be naturally independent of the tyrannies you seek to impose on us. You have no moral right to rule us, nor do you possess any methods of enforcement that we have true reason to fear." I remember reading those words and thinking he had gotten caught up in a weird techno-fever dream, but it does capture what we now recognize as naive optimism of the time, that the cyberspace community would stand for purer values than the physical world, that it could self-govern, that earthly governments could only corrupt its democratic essence. This, of course, was all wrong. As technologists, whether you end up building tech for the public or the private sector, it is your responsibility to give proper recognition to the people who will live, willingly or not, with your technology. Those people live in a context of laws and governments, social norms and biases, economic, physical, and personal challenges that defy being captured in code. So, a few final words of advice. Build ambitiously and inclusively to cover the full spectrum of people and their needs. Build systems that are responsive and accountable. Be awesome at tech, but also be honest about the things that tech can't solve and the things that it can make worse. With that said, if you go on to work in the area of tech policy, Your most important milestones in the next few years will not be any particular project or system that you build. The work of the next few years is actually to change the culture in the public sector about tech's role and the processes and decision frameworks that support it. Our challenges in this century are huge. The security of our infrastructure, from telecommunications to electricity to transportation, the integrity of the census that will start next year, the introduction of more and new surveillance technologies in our cities, and the use of that data in our name. At the end of the day, as my friend Jen Palka says, this government is still just us. No one guarantees us a functional democracy. As technologists, it is our responsibility to care for our future, to insist on being part of its development, and to take seriously technology's roles in our lives, our communities, and our governments. Congratulations, fellows, and thank you for your service. Okay. Question.
So we have time for a few questions. Okay, of course.
One way.
Riley, would you grab another one?
Thank you so much for your fantastic comments. It's super inspiring. My name is Daniel Wu. I work at a data ethics startup. Essentially, my question to you is, what are some examples of culture change for trust? Any stories that you can share about that happening? You mentioned the critical role of trust, especially for the policy work that this involves. I want to point everyone to OECD's Trust Lab report, where they looked cross-nationally at different surveys to think about the predictors of trust. One of the biggest predictors was the perception that you believe that the political process, the policy process, is corrupt and is not just stacked in favor of those who have more money and influence. And I think that while we should also be thinking about policies that are optimal, how do we also think about the policy process to be equitable, fair, and trustworthy? So I'd love to hear a story, anecdote, or an example that you can share about trust being built successfully.
Yeah, let me take that in two ways, because like trust in culture, or changing culture trust, and then trust in our systems trust are two slightly different things. So like trust in our systems, absolutely. And I think there's a really interesting movement now around how do we become more transparent about the systems and how they work, particularly in the area of like, I hate using the word AI, but like algorithmic decision making, right? So that's the start of what is happening in New York, which is like, how do we define the system that is making automated decisions, and how do we open that black box of decision making to sort of interrogate whether those decisions are being made fairly, right? And that we agree with them or can contest them. So I think that's one part of how do we build for trust. Part of it is that level of transparency. In the culture part of it, my experience, and I was in the Obama administration when we stood up the US digital services, doing that in a large government entity takes a lot of trust. You can't come in and say like, I'm here to change the world, move fast and break things. That's not a thing we do in government. And in particular, when some of the things you break may be someone's benefits, that's actually an unacceptable level of work. And so coming in a humble way to a group of people who could make a lot more money elsewhere, and instead they're doing public service work and being respectful of that and making that work to the benefit of all of the people, that's the kind of attitude you have to go in with. And I've seen it done poorly and some do it well. But to me, as some of you go into service, it's really important to keep in mind the environment that you're coming into and to treat it with respect.
One more question.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm Michael Golding with the Economist Intelligence Unit. I'd like to ask about policymaker priorities when it comes to technological regulation. In particular, I guess the conception is that policymakers are essentially answerable to their constituents, and most people, as according to my understanding, don't care too much about technology regulation. I mean, if you ask about major concerns, it's the economy, it's healthcare, those list goes on and on. You have to get pretty far down there before you see things like breaking up big tech companies and whatnot. So I'm just kind of curious, what's the disconnect? And is this something that that grassroots voters and people who are actually putting policymakers off should care about more, and why aren't they caring more about it?
So I guess I would push a little on the premise of healthcare isn't a thing that matters and that technology isn't a big part of that. So healthcare.gov, right? It was really important that people be able to get healthcare, and the fact that our website broke down on the first day of launch, that was a bad technology happening, and our priority was misplaced perhaps in making sure that we got the tech part right of the policy goal of getting everyone healthcare. But so I guess part of the question is why aren't some of the big tech issues, data privacy, content regulation, and other things, a bigger issue for folks? Part of it is I think it may be somewhat abstracted from some people's daily lives. Even though your data is collected all the time, every minute out of your phone and other devices, you may not be seeing how that changes your world and environment. Some of that is actually about education for a wider mass of people, although I'd say in the last decade we've gotten much more sophisticated in our understanding of how our data gets used and reused. That said, I wouldn't put everything on the public to know and to care how their data gets used. And so then that's actually the role of experts and civil society, right? People like EFF or the ACLU, who have been super active in this space for 20 years or more. And to empower them, right, to be on the lookout. There's a dance, this is part of the dance, which is there are lots of players in the space. Some of them are regulators, some of them are civil society, some of them are the users themselves, and some of them are the tech companies holding themselves accountable in some sense. And figuring out the dance and the responsibilities among those four players is actually the test we have for the next generation.
Fantastic. We're going to have to leave it there, but first I want to thank you with a little parting gift from the Hub. It contains actual branded Aspen Tech Policy Hub chocolates, so if you didn't already want to apply, we now have that. And sorry, fellas, we didn't have those for you guys yet, but we're working on it.